Brian O'Hearn just played you a little bit of Cripple Creek. We live near a couple creeks, and we're about to cripple the town by offering a 0.24% whatever percent increase to the budget with all the cuts on the town side. The Finance Board has not addressed 62% of our budget, which is the education budget, because the Board of Education has refused to cooperate with them. So anyway, that was a bit of Cripple Creek.
Yeah, hello everybody, this is Brian O'Hearn. I do have a guest tonight. The guest is a albatross, if you all remember, especially you teachers that are out there. Samuel Taylor Coleridge wrote a very famous rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. A mariner shoots an albatross and is obliged to carry the bird hung around his neck as a punishment for the reminder of his ill deed. We have a lot of albatrosses flying around here, and a lot of people who probably deserve to wear an albatross around their neck for the state we're in here in this town. But anyway, tonight I'm going to be on because of the budget that's in process. Actually, while I'm recording this evening, they're going to have the third budget town meeting, where I expect they'll probably pass the latest proposal by the Finance Board and Selectmen. Tonight I want to talk about three issues. One, the latest fiscal year 2012-2013 third budget proposal, which is about 1/4 of a 1% increase in taxes. Secondly, I'd like to talk about fiscal year 2013-14, next year's fiscal year. We're already in 2012-2013, working to the old budget from last year. But next year, as I've mentioned before on this program and elsewhere, there is a possible 21% mill rate increase for everybody in town for a zero increase or decrease budget. If the budget is even with this year's, then it'd probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of 21%. I'm going to talk a bit about that and explain some of these details to you tonight so you're not in the dark. A lot of confusion about it, of course, all over town because politics enters into these things. It shouldn't. This is mathematics, and this is finance board stuff, which should be apolitical, absolute value of numbers, and only facts, honesty, and truth should be discussed, and all sides of the issues should be discussed. Unfortunately, that's not the case around here, as most people know and believe and talk about everywhere, not only here, but all over the state, I guess. And the third thing will be the Board of Education, MBR, albatross. This year, the first two budget referendums have voted overwhelmingly, roughly around 2-1, not exactly, but in both cases, to decline the fiscal 2012-2013 budget increase that was requested by the Selectmen and Board of Finance of 8.4% and 4%. They failed overwhelmingly. The town budget referendum number 3 is scheduled for a 1/4% increase after decimating the town budget in favor of the ever-growing but underperforming education budget once again. Personal property revenue may be going up. That's trucks, cars, business assets, things like that. It's very profitable money because they don't have children in the school system to match this money. So that could be going up, and we won't know for sure for a while, but there are rumors about that, which means the increase could be a little less than a 1/4 of a mil. But many of those that are impacted by this personal property tax going up a little bit may be appealing. So we won't know. We'll have to wait to see what happens. Keeping taxes under control is making some progress recently. You'll see a slide go up, slide number 1. 8.4% is what the selectmen wanted for the first referendum. 2.1% would be how much that 8.4% would add up for next year, plus 21%, which means we would have a budget increase if the 21% does occur, and there are some ifs there, which we'll go over tonight, would be 31.5%. So at the time of the first referendum, we were looking at roughly 31.5% between this year and next year, and I've included in here 2.1% because that's the 21% of the 8.4%. So you'll see that in the second referendum and the third one as well. The second time around, they came with roughly 4%. I can't remember the exact figure, but 4%, and then 21% of 4% is 1%, plus 21% for the reval next year would mean our taxes over these 2 years will go up 26%. That failed as well. Referendum number 3, which will happen in a few more weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, somewhere before the 8th of September, I'm told. They'll pick a date tonight. Or by the time you see this, they've already picked the date. But that would be 0.25%, a quarter of a percent. And 21% of a quarter of a percent is 0.05%. Plus 21% next year would be 21.3%. So we've made a lot of progress. We've gone from 31.5% possible when we first started these referendums down almost, about 10%, a little more than 10%, to a total of 21.3%. If this referendum passes, if this passes off the referendum from the budget meeting tonight and then into the referendum before September 8th or so. Thank you very much for that slide. The next thing I want to say is the voters are totally registered are 6,828. I always want to remind people about that. 6,828 people vote. The Democrats are 1,824. Republicans are 1,444. Unaffiliateds are 3,515. And other things like Independent Party, Green Party maybe, and other things like that, I don't know exactly what constitutes this, 45. And these are the number of people who can vote in the general elections for selectmen, Board of Education, town clerk, and I guess it's the constables as well. So it looks to me, if you look at these numbers, like about 40% of them, the Democrats of the town, are trying to unsuccessfully to bully the remaining 60% of the town on budget issues. Not good. Now, I wouldn't want you to think that all the 40% of the Democrats are involved in this, because most of the fiscally conservative Democrats, just like the fiscally conservative Republicans and the fiscally conservative unaffiliated voters and the other fiscally conservative other voters, they're not really trying to bully anybody or push anybody around. They're trying to bring balance to the budget. Revenue coming in, expenses going out, and we should not overspend if we don't have the revenue. That's their idea. And I'm a fiscal conservative, and I'm unaffiliated. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'll vote for any fiscal conservative that believes in earning $1 before you spend $1. And trying to balance the budget. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't know where you're coming from, but that's where I'm coming from. So who voted us into this mess? It's very important to know that the part-time Lake, Winchester, and town property owners cannot vote for the election of selectmen, Board of Finance members, town clerk, and constables. They vote elsewhere. Residents that may or may not be resident property taxpayers vote in this election every other year in November, if registered. The part-time property taxpayers can vote in the town budget meetings and the town budget referendum. So it's very important for you to realize, especially if you live in and you're a part-time resident, that you cannot vote for the selectmen because you vote elsewhere in other states and towns and cities. You can't vote for the selectmen, the finance board, which are the same here in this town. You can't vote for the Board of Education members, and you can't vote for the town clerk or the constables. Anybody else who runs in those elections, I can't remember them all. So the people that do vote, vote in who they think best serves their interests. But then, when we have anything to do with the budget, like the town budget meeting or the town budget referendum or any town budget referendum where more money has to be approved by the taxpayers, you can vote there. And that's where we get a little dichotomy here. That's where we get a little bit of a Hobson's choice. Because the people who vote for the selectmen, the Board of Education, etc., they vote in the people they think will serve their needs the best. But then when the taxpayers go to vote on the budget, they vote for what they think will serve their needs the best. And actually what they do is they join a lot of the town people who are fiscally conservative across all the parties and all the groups. And in the last two referendums, they totally outnumbered the views of the people that were elected in the last election. And this happens quite frequently. It doesn't matter whether Democrats or Republicans or whatever. Often the taxpayers are not in sync with them and don't vote for the things they ask for. And that's because a lot of the taxpayers that vote for the money are not allowed, probably for good reason, to vote here for the selectmen, etc. So that's a very important point for you all to know. And if you are a part-time resident, it's very important for you to vote on these budget issues. It's very important for you to express your opinions. And if you can't vote in person, you should do it from your home, wherever it may be. You can do it by mail, or you can stop when you're in town. For example, if the town budget meeting picks a date tonight for the referendum, you can go down tomorrow and vote. So when you're in town, try to vote as quickly as possible if you're not going to be here on the voting day. And often you're not, especially if it's after Labor Day and you've gone home for the winter. There are three reasons for what's happening here, I think. The world, state, and town economy, with the everlasting 8.2% unemployment rate, Bernanke says it may last 8 or more years. That could be true or false. He's the chairman of the Fed. Business sufferings and closings and property devaluations. Properties are devaluating everywhere, including in our area downtown here. The second reason is the refusal again of the Board of Education to cooperate with the Board of Finance and the selectmen in their attempt to right-size the education budget. The education budget is 62% of our budget. And we all know, and I'll talk a bit about them tonight if there's enough time, there's a lot of inefficiencies in that budget, as there are in everybody's budget. I always say that people can come into my home and they can show me how I can save 10% of my yearly budget. That's easy. I can do the same in anybody else's home. If you go to the state level, you can probably save them 25%, doing no harm. If you go to federal level, it's probably 50%, doing no harm. Same in big bureaucracies, companies. I could always go into a company and show them how to save a lot of money because there's a lot of inefficiencies, especially if you move into socialistic or countries where they're full of inefficiencies, so much so that they can't even sell products and they eventually have problems. The third reason is the looming possible 21% mill rate increase coming throughout town for the next year's budget, 2013, 2014, if the budget is not increased or decreased, or the grand list increases, it could be less than the possible. If the grand list increases, it could be less than the possible 21%. And then the grand list may move a little over the year. You can't, it's hard to predict that. We will know for sure for a while. We still didn't really have the closing for last year yet, the audit, so it's hard to tell for sure exactly what all the numbers are. Our finance director does not like to go public with numbers until he's sure he knows what he's talking about, and I agree with him 100%. So he'll always give you rough estimates, he'll give you a rough idea, but until he gets the final information, he won't tell you for sure what things are. So there are some concerns about the 21%. That's basically people in town have looked through the information that Vision Appraisal's looking at. They've come up with some numbers, and they think it'll probably be an average of 21% for everybody in the town for a mill rate increase because of the property devaluations. As you know, most of our taxes come from property valuations, the appraisal price. Then you take 70% of that as the assessed value, and that's a mill rate, which I'll explain a bit tonight, is applied to that, and that's how much your taxes will pay. You can't appeal that, and some people do appeal it. Some people take many years to get through the appeal process, but first you can appeal it with Vision Appraisal, then you can appeal it with the town. They have a little group down there and a committee or a commission, whatever it is, that looks at these things, and if that doesn't work, you can go to the state, go to the courts, or wherever the next step is. So there's some ifs here which I want to tell you, because you never know what's going to happen here between now and the next preparation of the budget. We do know one thing. I'm pretty sure that the profitable revenue is not going to go up much. We're pretty sure about that. Now, it could go up a little bit, but not a heck of a lot. And there are some things in this current budget that's going forward for the 0.25% increase that are a bit of a gamble. There's about $78,000 or $9,000 for a deal they have to make with the unions on medical plans. And there's some money in there for a grant for about $150,000, $75,000. That may go away next year. I'm not sure. I haven't had a chance to talk to the financial director, but that's upwards pressure on next year. That means we got to find that 150, and it's upward pressure on this year if we can't find or we can't agree with the unions on a 79% for the medical plans. So there is a possibility that the mill rate increase can be divided over a 5-year period. The state has changed their rules in the last 6-7 months, and they said that if your assessments go down like they're going to do this year, we think, that you can take that 21% and spread it over 5 years. There may be complications with that for our town, not necessarily for Torrington or other towns, but because we have the downtown, which has really got whacked on valuations as we understand it. They went down considerably in the last 5 years, and Vision Appraisal and that comes in between October and December, should make that clear. The lake has stayed about the same, and Winchester has gone down a little bit too. So we know that overall we're going to be down, and that's where the 21% lift in the mill rate would be necessary. But the state says, hey, you can put that out over 5 years. Now, the people downtown may or may not like that because they don't want to be paying more money than their home is worth for 5 years. They're going to want the break right away. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a few more seconds. So there may be complications with this. You'll hear talk about it in the select meetings and all. Some people think it's great. Other people think it's nuts. I happen to think it's just delaying the day of reckoning. And there are other problems that if you don't get the money from the taxpayers, you probably have to get a bond or borrow the money somehow, and that costs interest, and it gets very, very complex. And that's why I'm talking to you about that tonight. You will hear all kinds of things about it, but we'll just have to watch for it over the next few months, and then many months, and see what happens, and see what course the Finance Board will eventually take on that. The second thing is, some think that some official jiggery-pokery may go on to ease a revaluation blow. That maybe people will try to monkey with the numbers and manipulate the numbers. Others don't think that will happen at all, because all the information is available in the town hall and people can appeal and contest and sue and everything. So and the jury's out on that. I don't have an opinion one way or the other on that because I don't know enough about it. But that's always a possibility, because we have a big lack of trust in this town in our leaders, and we don't know ever how they're going to go with these things in the majority. Number 3, if the 2013-2014 budget is decreased or the grand list increases, it could be less than the possible 21%. Now I'm going to put up another chart which shows you roughly, if it is 21%, roughly what the values will be. If your home is worth $150,000 after the last, if it's assessed at $150,000 after the last, the next revaluation this year, it will increase your taxes by $801, and that's in 2 payments of 450 cents each or whatever. Then 200,000, 1,078. 300,000, 1,617. 400,000, 2,156. 500,000, 2,695. Starting to get up to some pretty big numbers there. And 600,000, 3,234. I haven't gone up any higher than that. I haven't gone any lower than the 150. I just try to get in sort of in the mid-range here so everybody get a rough idea what that 21% means to people. Now, this money will only go towards keeping the existing budget that we have this year for the following year. It's based on a zero increase, decrease budget. If they want more money for the town or the schools next year, then you have to add that to these amounts of money, depending on how many mills it is. You jack that 21% up. If it's 3 mills they want, then you gotta jack it up for that. If it's 2 mills, you jack it up for that. If it's 1 mill, you jack whatever it is they come in for. But most likely they're going to have a hard time getting any increase once that 21% hits the books. If, for example, if they average it over 5 years, it'll be hard to get any increase for 5 years, because if people are going to get, let's say, an average of 5% increase for the 20 or 4% increase for the 21% for 5 years, they're not going to want to pay any more for taxes. So they're going to vote down, most likely. Never know for sure. They're going to vote down, and unless we can get some more additional recurring profitable revenue into town, we're going to be pretty well stuck. So that's the big thing, sort of Damocles hanging over our neck. We got to get that revenue in. I presented red papers to the Finance Board, selectmen, and anybody else who wanted them. And we don't talk about that much tonight because we're in the soup here, and we're not going to get out of it with revenue for quite a few years. We don't even have a vehicle or an engine to propel us out of it for a year or two. So we're going to have to be looking very carefully at costs, and we got this 21% reval issue hanging over our head, and no matter how we handle it, it's not going to be good for the town. So I wanted you to see the next slide now, which is the tax at new assessment. So I want to show you people downtown or people in any area where there's devaluation that if your house is now presently, this is just the numbers to give you an idea, is worth $100, make it easy to understand, and it goes down to an assessment of $50, then you will pay taxes at the new rate next year of $50. But they will add 21% for the mill rate increase. And whether they do it on 1 year or over 5 years, you're going to be paying 21% more for a roughly 50% reduction in your property value. That is not good mathematics. That's not good business. Now, some people have said to me, oh, that's okay, Brian. At least I'm not paying more than I did before. Because you still might be paying less than you do now. But it's just the difference between what your property is worth and how much your taxes are being paid. And I just want to reiterate to everybody, when this money goes to taxes for a 0% increase or decrease in the budget, it don't go to stores, it doesn't go to schools, it doesn't go to all your other needs, insurances, and everything else you have in your life. It's gone from your budget. The increase will also put a lot of pressure on housing prices. And they will probably be slow to sell. It's already happening. And prices of even the good homes, the higher priced homes, will drop. And when they drop, since our taxes are based upon their assessments, we'll get less money, and we either have to cut our costs further, or we have to up the mill rate again. Maybe in 5 years we'll need another 21%. So fiscal conservatives like myself and many of the other voters in town who voted 2-1 to knock these budgets down are very concerned about that. And we want to make sure that we start now to manage the situation in a balanced manner. And to do that, we have to address the 62%, one way or another, whether the state allows us to or not. I'm not saying we should break any laws. We'll talk a bit about that later too. But we can't say, well, everybody else has got that problem. We got to say, well, we want to be the ones who solve the problem. And if nobody else solves it, there's nothing we can do about it. Maybe we can use them to help us solve the problem. But, we got to solve our problems in this town, and we got to succeed. We can't be blaming it on the economy. We can't blame it on anybody else. In the end, it's our responsibility to manage our budget, fiscally responsible, and keep the town humming away while the management tries to get us some more additional recurring, profitable tax money that we can use to fund all these things. So now I'm going to move away from the slide, which I've already done, and I'm going to talk a bit about the reval increase for next year, just to remind you. Possibly 21% or more, could be more or less. We'll know in a few more months. Maybe won't even know totally until the next budget. The whole town will have the new appraisals. Everybody will get a new appraisal. It might be the same as your last one, but we'll all have new appraisals. They're coming, probably be mailed out sometime before December, if not December. The 21% assumes zero increase in fiscal year 2013, 2014 budget, and zero decrease as well. We'll know more about the reval impact around October, December of 2012. I'll probably come on TV then again and let you give an update at that time. If not, you can watch James Roberts' programs. He's on every week. He's on Channel 13. He's on at 7:30. Well, he's every other week as a new show, but he's on every week. He repeats quite a bit in the off weeks. But the name of his program is Effective, Efficient, Affordable, and Accountable to You. And he's a fiscal conservative Democrat. We have plenty of good fiscal conservative Democrats in this town. I can name 5 or 6 right off the top of my head that have master's degrees and big experience around the world in accounting and finance and can really be of help to our town. There's plenty of those. There's plenty of them in the unaffiliated group. There's plenty of them in the other group of 50 people. There's plenty of them in the Republican Party. And there's plenty of them that probably don't belong to any of these parties. So we don't have a lack of that knowledge in our town. but we just got to find it, put it to better use. Well, that's one of the things I want to talk a bit more about tonight, too. We'll know more about reval impact October, December 2012 when results are in from vision appraisal, and they'll be all sent out to your house, and then they'll be all will be a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them will be contested through the system, vision, state, perhaps elsewhere, legal, all. So I want to say right now, very clearly and very loudly, I advise all property owners, including myself, to have their own appraisals done privately and to appeal your revaluation result so you can participate in any possible class action suit against the town or for raising the mill rate and not lowering the town or the school budget. Now, I'm not exactly sure what will happen, but I do know there have been class action suits in the past here about taxes against the town, the suits against the town, etc. And if you have not appealed to the town and gone through the appeal process, then you probably can't participate in any class action suits. It might also help you to really know, and I tell this to people anyway, even when there's no revaluation, check your card. You can get one down at the town hall. It tells all about your piece of property or your pieces of property, and you can see exactly what they have on there, and there's often mistakes in there. They did send a letter out this year, and they said, does this represent what you have? 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, that kind of thing. And then you say, oh no, I got 4 bathrooms, or I got 2 bathrooms, or my upstairs is not apartment like you say on the card. So you got to get your card, you got to look at it or have somebody else look at it for you, and then you got to make sure it's accurate, because that's what you're going to get taxed on. And then if you don't like it, matter of fact, I would do it just as a precaution, I would appeal. And you can't lose when you appeal. You might not gain anything, but it's a good idea to really understand what you're paying for and to do that. So I want to explain now just quickly how revaluation works. Every 5 years, it used to be 10 up until a few years back, every 5 years we have a revaluation where we hire somebody like Vision Appraisal or somebody else to come in and evaluate the town. Sometimes they go in the house, sometimes they don't, and they try to reevaluate. Sometimes the values go way up, like in the good years. Sometimes they go down, like in the bad years. Some go up, some go down. If somebody's added to their house, the value might go up even in the bad years. If somebody's house burned down, the value will go down. It's that kind of thing. So every 5 years, this is one of the 5 years right now that happens in our state, the state of Connecticut. You can and should appeal your new valuation with Vision Appraisal and the Town Appeals Board. Once you get it, read it, understand it, take it down there and make sure you really know. I did that last time and the time before. Valuation can increase or lower your property tax. If your valuation is going down, you should get a lower tax. You'll always be subject to mill rate increases, but that's a different, or decreases, but that's a different story. If the overall average is an increase or decrease, the mill rate will be increased or decreased accordingly, because the town still needs the same amount of money roughly to run, and I'll talk a bit about that later if we have time. But basically, governments and towns and bureaucracies never spend less. Take it from me. They always spend more. When's the last time you can remember a decrease in the town or education budget in this town? If decreased, the town must cut the budget for the next fiscal year, which they probably won't do, or increase the mill rate, which they almost always do, to obtain the needed following fiscal year budget funds to be able to run the town. Now, if they take the 5-year approach, they may have to borrow money, because they'll still need the money to run the town, even though they're not getting it from the taxpayers right away. They're getting it over 5 years. So they probably might have to bond or find some other way to borrow the money, which means, guess what? We pay interest on that. So it costs us more money to be able to do it that way. That's one of the things that has to be taken into consideration when the town leaders look at that option to see if they want to apply it or not. Now, how does the mill rate work? Well, I'm going to explain that to you. You can always find more about this by going down to the town hall and talking to the experts down there. But a mill is equal to $1 of tax for each $1,000 of assessment. That's what a mill is. $1 of tax for each $1,000 of your assessment. To calculate the property tax for your particular property, multiply the assessment of the property, that's the assessment, not the appraisal, but the assessment, which is 70% of the appraisal value, and the assessment you'll know. So you multiply the assessment of the property by the mill rate and divide by 1,000. For example, a property with an assessed value of $50,000 located in a municipality with a mill rate of 20 mills would have a property tax bill of $1,000 a year. Now, of course, that varies because it all depends upon the value of your property. But the thing that doesn't change is a mill is equal to $1 for each $1,000 of assessment. So there is a formula there. If you want to know more about it, just contact the finance director or somebody down in the assessor's office or somewhere down in town hall, town manager, or whoever you think you can get the information from. Now I'm going to talk quite a bit about the MBR myths that are happening in this town. Myth is a myth. There are plenty of myths. You all know what a myth is. The rhyme of the Ancient Mariner is a myth. There are a lot of myths. And one of our problems here is that people don't give you both sides of the story because politics gets involved in these things. Now, finance directors and our finance director is excellent at staying out of politics. He's the best I've seen in a long, long time, and I'd hire him if I had a company. But unfortunately, people on the finance board tend to mix politics in this thing. And we don't have a separate finance board like they have in Torrington, which is made up of people who are accountants, business owners, and people that's separate from their, what they call a council, which we call a selectman. And they're not supposed to be political on the finance board. Not supposed to be at all. They're supposed to look at the absolute value of the numbers, make sure things get questioned, make sure the facts get on the table, and make sure that their budget's balanced. I was down in Torrington once at a council meeting. Actually, it was a finance board meeting because they have a separate meeting for the council and a separate meeting for the finance board. And the young mayor at the time was about 25 years old, different form of government down there, and he was chairing the finance board meeting with the power to vote in case of a tie. And one of the people on the finance board who was very, very numerate, as they all are on that finance board, told him that she couldn't get the information she needed from the Board of Education for that budget year to consider how they should handle that Board of Education budget as a finance board. So she talked about it for 10 minutes. I got it on tape at home. I filmed the whole thing for a program I had. After about 10 minutes, the mayor said, "You can't get the information you need from the Board of Education? Leave it with me." The next finance board meeting, he came back and he said, "Did you get the information you needed from the Board of Education?" And she said, "Yes, I did. Thank you very much." So I just assumed that he intervened, told him, "Look, give us the information. We need it to do our job as a finance board. We can't do it without it. Please give it to us." So to clear up some myths here, you've been hearing on TV, and I heard it in selectmen meetings, guy got up and said, "Oh, the MBR, it's illegal. You know, the state requires you to have an MBR, minimum budget requirement, which means you got to allocate to the schools as much money as the minimum budget requirement requires." But what the fella didn't say, what nobody ever says when they're being political, is that the first thing they say is reducing the MBR is against the state law. They make it very clear. When you read it in the newspapers or you hear it on TV, when they say that, they're trying to tell you it's against the state law. And what I'm going to tell you tonight is, and I'm not an expert on it, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not an MBR expert, but I did talk to a lot of people, and there is some flexibility, as there always is when you deal with in governments and bureaucracies and in almost any situation, business-wise. There is flexibility. And there are some things that are allowed and some things that aren't under certain conditions. The truth, as I understand it, is, yes, it is against the state law, but the town must appropriate the MBR money to the Board of Education. That has to happen each year. The Board of Education does not have to spend it, as I understand it. If they find ways to conserve and to be more efficient, and we'll talk about some ways they can do that if we have enough time, they don't have to spend it. They can give it back to the town under certain circumstances and rules, and that will probably be approved by the state. I'm not saying it will be, but if we went jointly as a Board of Education and a Board of Finance and a Board of Selectmen to the state and talk turkey, we might be able to reduce the MBR. Now, there are plenty of reasons why the Board of Education doesn't want to reduce the MBR, and those that support it. We'll talk, I hope, about that tonight. If the school gives the remainder back to the town, the MBR will not be reduced for the next year. So it's not a real problem. They'll still have an MBR that we will have to legally appropriate the money to next year. The BOE, Board of Education, can do some efficient things like close one or more schools and ask the state. Now, I'm not here talking now whether or not we think they can save money. The fiscal conservatives say we do it all the time when we merge companies, when we go around the world, everywhere we are, we find ways to get it done. The people here say, oh no, it won't save a penny. So you got that argument going on. Because we can't get forensic audit numbers from anybody, from the Board of Education, we don't know for sure exactly, whether the numbers are political or apolitical. And what we want are apolitical numbers. We want to know facts. We're business people. That's what we want to know. The MBR rules are used to determine what percent of state school funding had to be used in the schools. Only in recent years has the legislature changed everything by saying you must allocate 100% of what you allocated last year. That's only been in recent years. The MBR legislation is detailed, but practically speaking, State Department of the Education allows towns to interpret it however they like, as long as local Board of Education is okay with that interpretation. Ours is not, but could be if they played ball with the finance board, selectmen, and the taxpayers of the town. Towns where Board of Selectmen and Board of Education are united, of course, have created holes that you can drive a truck through, I'm told, in the practical implementation of the MBR. The state will be reasonable, but you have to go there jointly with a reasonable argument, with good facts, good figures, and be able to express your concern. The Connecticut Department of Education, I'm told, is being contested on the MBR by various towns, cities, etc. Is being challenged in the courts. They may lose this based on the home rule realities of life are paramount. The state usually defers to the town if the town is in unison and understands enough about it to talk intelligently with the state about it. Now, Alliance district status, that means we have a certain percentage, we're in the bottom 30% of certain test scores, so we're declared an Alliance district. That trumps all legislatively permitted changes to the MBR, i.e., if we accept 200,000 from them each year for the next 5 years, which we're trying to do, no MBR reductions at all will be allowed. I would still want to go and talk to them about that and try to negotiate it. There are better ways to do it, which I hope to talk about here. There's a 3,000 reduction for student declines in Winchester District. If our numbers of students is going down, we're allowed to deduct 3,000. I don't know how that works once we accept the Alliance District money, but that's what it's been and is up until now. So 3,000 reduction. Now it costs us, of course, 12 or 13,000 to educate a child, so 3,000 doesn't really make a big dent in that. Now, declines in enrollment at Gilbert over the years, subject not being Alliance and being frozen on the MBR, could be $12,000 to $13,000 per head reduction. Not 3,000, 12 to 13,000. So as their numbers go down, which they look like they're doing over the years, that's what's kind of predicted, I think, then we could save some money there. If the MBR survives long enough, the MBR may or may not be increased to pick up the Alliance funding. After the 5 years, the state says, okay, we're not giving you that $200 a year anymore. Those teachers you hired and those other professionals and whatever else, you got to pay for yourself, so the MBR will go up, most likely. Not necessarily, but most likely. We could, again, contest that. We could go through the whole thing, but we have to do it as a town. We can't be fighting with each other when we go to do that. You know, a lot of times now when you go to get a divorce, which I've never done, they send you to somebody to help patch up the situation between husband and wife before you go for the divorce. I don't know, a counselor of some sort. And we have to kind of do that here with our own leadership. Much possible efficiency has been suggested for running more efficiently in the education system, 62% of our town budget. For example, and I'm just giving you examples here, doesn't mean any of them will ever happen or can happen or will be worth doing. Close a school. You will save on utilities, maintenance, and school nurse, secretary, etc. The estimated savings there by one party is $500,000, by the other is zero, or even costly. So you got a big difference. That's because we don't have any forensic audited numbers to be able to look at. Perhaps close a second school. If we half the school is half full, 4 schools half full, doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that there could be some savings there. On the other hand, other people say, wow, we'll put more in those schools. Other people say, well, we can't afford to put more in those schools. So it goes on and on. Next, trim the administration in the schools. K through 12 has 1.5 superintendents, 3 principals, 2 assistant principals, 1 special education director, 2 finance managers, a legion of psychologists and social workers, and behavioral specialists. I'm not saying we don't need some of those, but, you know, it should be looked at very carefully by the financial people in the town and in the education. We're going to rationalize benefits. We provide employee benefits. Employee pays for spouse and family on medical type benefits, and I know they're looking at that a little bit now for the town side of the budget, but we got to do the same thing for the education side of the budget, and it's got to be fair for everybody, the employees and the town and the taxpayers. Rationalize teaching staff over reduced schools' footprint. You know, as we get less and less, John Gauger keeps talking about this. Maybe we got to do Milton Friedman type things, like send more people to other areas, vouchers and things like that. There's 2 sides to that argument, of course, but sooner or later you got to make a decision that you can afford. Outsource all non-teaching functions. That's a possibility. Shared with Gilbert, Region 7, St. Anthony's, Community College, etc. Some of that, I guess, goes on already. Maybe we can do better on that. Maybe we can't. I'm not an expert in this area. I'm a numbers man. I believe in getting the revenue to fund all this. But we're not able to do that. I've been trying to get the revenue here for 12 years. I've been coaching everybody. I've been on commissions. I've tried everything. But it ain't happening. And I don't think it's going to happen for the next 10 years. So we're going to have to deal with these issues. If needed, eliminate pre-K. I know that's touchy. It's a nice thing to have. But we are not legally required to have it. All studies indicate it is worthless without parents and community involvement and push. I'm not saying we don't need it. I'm just saying it has to be something that has to be looked at hard if you can't afford it. Increase class size. Wow, isn't that interesting? How many people have you heard of older? First of all, I never went to kindergarten, by the way. There was none when I was in school. And increase the class size. How many people here say, hey, there were 30 in my class and we did all right? Well, it looks like, and I'm not an expert here either, you got to talk to the experts on both sides, there are two sides of the story. Studies indicate the quality of teacher far more impactful than the class size. So maybe a little shift has to take place there. Our test scores ain't the best in the world here, no matter what our class size is or what we pay our teachers or how long they've been there. Now, I know the target keeps moving. Don't get me wrong on that. The target does keep moving. And then someone has suggested an approach using lateral positive system thinking that I always profess and a lot of people in the world use. That would be the town, instead of getting the 200 grant from the state for the Alliance District status, which we've applied for as a town, or Board of Education, I guess. Instead of doing that, that will kill all MBR reductions, and there are many possible MBR reductions that we could do efficiently, that won't hurt the quality of education, but will improve the efficiency of the spending, perhaps saving $1 million or so per annum. That's quite a bit. Then the town, rather than the state, should put the $200,000 on the table for 5 years, each year, in return for the Board of Education support for a reduction of $800,000 of the MBR relief with the state. We'd have to go there and talk to the state about it, show them that we're trying to help ourselves and we don't want their grant. Now remember, with grants comes a lot of conditions, From the town, probably would come no conditions. We'd get in and work together and try to make it work. Now, I told you I would talk a bit about, I only got a few minutes left, but some truths about government and bureaucratic spending, and I've seen a lot of them all over the world in all kinds of different political environments. Government and bureaucracy spend inefficiently. They always want more. They always spend their whole budget. They never want to give back. They always want to use consultants to tell them what they want to hear. They use consultants to lay off blame if things are not working properly. Well, it wasn't me. It's a consultant. They use consensus management committees, which we have 1,000 of, to make decisions. Because then you can't blame me. You got to blame the committees and the commissions and all that. Now, weaknesses in the present budget that's presented, it doesn't get us ahead. We still need to reduce, restructure, and reinvest. This budget isn't going to do that. We're hanging on by our fingernails with this budget. All cuts are on the town side. No pressure on education side to manage spending. None. Zero. They refuse to work with the finance board, etc., etc. So this is a lousy budget. And not much tax increase, but it doesn't help invest in our future. So I would say vote for no on the tax increase, although I think most people will probably vote yes. And vote for no so we can try to get more tax decreases until the Finance Board and the Board of Education address the education MBR as a team with the state. And going forward, Plan to reduce the budget by 21% and raise profitable recurring revenue by 21%. Some balance in between there. Vote absent. By the way, you're not going to raise the revenue by 21%. You're probably not going to get the cost down, but you got to have a plan to try to do so and make some tough decisions. Vote absentee or in person, for all money matters. Please vote. It's very important in these tough times. And encourage fiscal conservatives of any party to run for the Board of Education and the Finance Board selectmen next year. We got to get in control of those boards, or we're never going to see the light of day. First priority on additional profitable recurring revenue. We need that revenue. We can't be the most unfriendly town in the world any longer. We're going to have to get more welcoming. Appeal your reval with vision and the town. This will position you for possible future growth and possible litigation, either on your own or with a group. Have your own appraisal done. And last but not least, fiscal conservatives across all parties, groups, anything, should stick together. For 12 years, I've been trying to unite the fiscal conservatives to vote the same way, to try to help the town be more responsible and get a balanced budget. And we're moving in that direction very rapidly, so we got to keep doing it. So all you fiscal conservatives out there, pay attention. This is the hour. This is the time to straighten out this town that's had a lot of problems over many, many years, since the flood, maybe before that. But let's get with it. Let's wake up, pay attention. Otherwise, it's going to be rough. Thank you very much. We'll try Cripple Creek once more.
This is Brian O'Hearn, just played you a little bit of Cripple Creek. We live near a couple creeks, and we're about to cripple the town by offering a 0.24% whatever percent increase to the budget, with all the cuts on the town side. The Finance Board has not addressed 62% of our budget, which is the education budget, because the Board of Education has refused to cooperate with them. So anyway, that was a bit of Cripple Creek.